Welcome to episode 17 of Running on OCP, where we speak with end users using Open Compute in a variety of ways. Now, this week we focus on Central Europe and some of the more impressive work being done around open networking, and that is the work being done at Deutsche Telekom. I speak with Vuk Gojnic, who is the squad leader and DevOps lead within DT, and joining him is Marcel Fest, a network engineer. And together they talk in detail about how they're using open networking, how they've moved from traditional networking over to open networking, and really talking about the benefits and the challenges and why they believe in this community mindset. So it's a great conversation with Vuk and Marcel, and hope you enjoy this week's episode of Running on OCP with DT. Thank you, Vuk and Marcel, for joining me today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having us.
So I'm excited. This is the first time I've had the opportunity to speak with your team about some of the new things that you're doing around open networking. But before we get into the details, Vuk, Marcel, tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got involved in DT and your role within DT. So we can start with Vuk first.
Yeah, my official title at the moment is a squad lead for a so-called computer engine or the container engine squad. It's essentially the Kubernetes platform, and we are a team that delivers that Kubernetes platform for DT in Germany. I'm by my background a developer, started as a web developer in '97, and by education I'm telecommunication engineer. So I spent more or less 20 plus years working in various positions and in various management roles on the crossing between these two things, like development and communications. So in Deutsche Telekom, I came through the multiple events and acquisitions. I'm originally from Montenegro, where my company where I work got acquired by a local company that got acquired by Deutsche Telekom, and then I ended up in Germany doing what I do currently.
Yeah. Hey, I'm Marcel. I'm a lead SRE with a focus on network and also partly storage. And yeah, I come to this team, to Vuk's team, in the beginning of 2020. So I'm pretty fresh to the project. Before that, I didn't had any history with the DT as a company. So I was in HPE. And before that, I studied applied computer science with a bachelor degree. And yeah.
That's great. So I think we have two really solid experts here to talk about the networking space. There's a lot of interest in the OCP community around what telcos are doing, both on the software and on the hardware and the disaggregation overall. So Vuk, for those who may not be fully aware of the size and scope of DT, can you share just a really high level overview of what DT does and the different regions that you're present in?
Sure. DT is, I would say, proper multinational or global corporation focused on communications and IT services. The fun fact is that many people from North America that I talk to do not know or get surprised that T-Mobile in US, we call it T-Mobile US, is actually part of Deutsche Telekom group, and it's in fact the biggest part of our group. We have a couple of more segments. One is a German domestic business, and there is a big global system integration business called T-Systems. So what we do mostly in core business is telecommunication and communication services, the whole spectrum of that, from fixed line, mobile, business, and so on. And all of that results in a currently $100 billion or euros actually yearly revenue, and the company is 220,000 plus people.
Yeah, the size is staggering when you start to include T-Systems, T-Mobile, and all the different regions that you're present in. Now, because you're such a large organization with many different divisions, how does DT go about evaluating new software and new hardware for particular technologies?
It's interesting, actually. There is a shift lately in the way how it's done. So there is still valid and working traditional approach, which is more driven top down. You have a group organizations, group technology organizations, which are doing the high level and then long-term architectural work, research projects, and then these kind of things. And these are being funneled into the different segment organizations where they are in a more operationalized or operational way treated and addressed. And then it ends up in the actual production. But lately, especially since introduction of DevOps and SRE principle in organization, especially in technology organization, we have increasingly this bottom-up approach, and innovation and evaluation is also driven by from the front lines, where people and teams facing the problem or facing the demand look for a best, I would say, Unix-like solution, Unix-like or Linux-like, meaning do exactly that thing that is needed and do it best. So through that approach, we are now adopting more and more things. One example is actually what we do here is grown from an operational organization that we are.
That's interesting how things have changed then. It used to be top down, and now so much with the advent of DevOps, you're saying that it's happening more on the front lines than it has in the past. I'm assuming that may be faster to market as well with the DevOps model.
Yeah, definitely. The examples actually go all the way to start very fast with the MVPs. So let's say having first prototypes, and then very soon it's end up in MVP, minimum viable product, that is usable to an extent, and that gets improved and extended, and through the iterations gets to the point that is covering more and more demand. So that's what we've seen more and more.
Well, as you being a Kubernetes squad leader, I think that if I were to say, here's a very well-established telco, there would be this perception that there's a lot of legacy proprietary type of software and infrastructure. I would assume, though, that DT does not only a lot of that, but also moving faster and extremely aggressive in the area of open source. So how does DT view the importance of open source when they think through software and hardware infrastructure?
Yeah, that's where we are currently, and our team and the environment. This looks like open source all the way through. So the open source landscape in general changed and became really a critical component, to the point that now lately, last couple of months, everybody's talking about this software supply chain security and so on, because we rely more and more for some critical components on it. So we actually are driving some of the things in adoption much more than it was before. And for example, the platform we built, including some of the things that we are probably going to talk about later, is fully relying on open source, where we are trying not to be only a user, but also the community member and contributor. So lately, I think there is a big shift towards open, and not only open in terms of open standards and APIs, which we lived many years and decades. So telco is all about standardization, and these standards are all open, but also open implementations and open source actually that sets the standard rather than the specification.
Well, let's get into that project. Set the scene. You have a really interesting project around open networking, so let's get into it. What is happening on the open networking side?
So to put that in the context, we are running the product that we are developing and that we deliver internally in organization is called das Schiff, which means a boat or sailing boat, which should symbolize that we are actually acting as a boat that takes care of containers of somebody else to bring them safely to the place where they should be. A bit of analogy with maritime business. Lately, we are also looking to the next iteration of it, which we call TCaaS, so Telco, Telecom, Cluster as a Service type of offerings. But essentially, what we do with that is we are trying, and the whole project is born by trying to answer the question, how do we manage, run, maintain hundreds and thousands of distributed clusters in a different environments with a small, skillful team of SREs? Like, how do we achieve a big scale without adding a lot of manual and hand-based labor? So this was a big question 2 years ago when we started. This brought big challenges, but one of the things that we very quickly found out at the beginning of that journey is that traditional networking model and traditional networks that we had in our environment would be a big obstacle in order to realize that on that scale. So it would be just too nice and too easy to be able to come with something very new and plug it into existing infrastructure and say, okay, it all works and it all covers the needs. So none of the existing networks could give us what we wanted and what we needed, and we had to innovate fast and iterate fast in order to achieve our goals and to bring the things, the end product into the internal market. Since we are all Linux people and number of us, including Marcel, Linux people with strong networking skills and know-how, we knew already that if we are going to do that, we cannot do that by just going and picking some networking stack or whichever networking stack. We knew already that to manage it with few people, network also needs to be Linux based. And this is how we evaluated a couple of things, checked, did a bit of small tests or litmus tests, and then decided, and based on the indication we got, saw that Sonic is 1.5 years ago gaining tremendous momentum, tremendous industry adoption. And then we decided to place bet on it, but also on the other side, we realized that it's not as mature for off-the-shelf usage as Kubernetes is. It's more like a still vendor-driven, which is nothing wrong. It's still a great asset that is going to get there. So we actually then realized, okay, we cannot do it on our own. We need to partner with some companies, and this is where we get into touch with company Stordis from Germany, which is a partner of EdgeCore. Then later on engage with Broadcom and also partially Dell in order to be able to consume that piece of open source well.
So are you using your own version of Sonic or using a distribution? And then I guess when you talked about a limited team, how many people are on this particular team? It must be from a DevOps angle, as you'd mentioned before, kind of the front lines instead of the top-down approach when you're evaluating this when it comes to architectural goals.
So to put that in perspective, we are not building our own Sonic image. As of now, we currently rely on the Broadcom Sonic distribution, which runs on all of the Broadcom ASIC provided switches. And we currently buy the hardware from the EdgeCore brand and run Broadcom Sonic on top. So the next questions, we are as big as a normal Scrum team. So we are, I think, now 11 people in the squad. And some of them are only half assigned to our project. So we are in, I think, in total then 10 people. Yeah, to get to what we do is we get the hardware from Stordis or another vendor, and currently it's EdgeCore, put that in the rack and then do zero-touch provisioning with it. And after the zero-touch provisioning, the Sonic is running and gets provisioned with the necessary network configuration for our fabric design. And after that, yeah, we can start connecting worker nodes to it and run a Kubernetes cluster. So that's how we currently have our stand-up approach done in our new modern fabric. And yeah.
Yeah. So as you look at this move, how does it address the pain points that you currently have into your current network infrastructure?
Yes, so we started with the current network infrastructure and try to implement the Kubernetes clusters into it. And we faced a lot of pain points with it. So the first one we had was when we wanted to provision a cluster in the cloud way, so that the customer can say, I need a cluster, and we can provide it in an hour or half an hour. We need to pre-provision a lot of stuff because on the one side, we need to configure the old fabric, which was a layer 2 fabric, and then a network operator needs to provide the specific VLANs with the gateways provided and so on, and also needs to do all the firewall configuration to get the communication done. And that introduced a lot of work which needs to be done to just get one cluster, and that needs to be repeatedly done for each individual cluster we want to provide. So that was the first pain point we had. And what we then decided was, instead of having the fabric ending on the leaf switch, we want to have it ending on the host. So what we did, we extend the fabric directly onto the host, and all the terminations of our customers are done on the host. So the fabric itself is just forwarding, and there's no access port configured. Then the next pain point was that all the separation in our current networks is done by VLANs, as you know it from vCenters or in the old way, yeah, done with bondings and VLAN separation for different networks. But that's an issue with Kubernetes itself because it handles just one interface and doesn't deal with any multi-interface connectivities. And either you can install Multus and circumvent it with different CNIs, or do it a different way. And what we decided was do it a different way and rely on L3 policies instead of VLAN separation. And that was the next pain point we addressed with that. And then we discovered a lot of issues doing operation with DHCP because it has those lease times. And when you do rolling upgrades of clusters, we had the issue that pools are then full because the lease times were not expired. And what we then did or decided was we don't want to have DHCP and want to have a central IPAM, which is taking care of the IP assignment, so that we don't run in collision issues or in this issue that a host is not removing its IP from the pool because it has a lease timer. And yeah, and then we decided that each of our customers needs to be separated from the others because we have in DT a highly separated network. It is separated in hundreds of VRFs and separated routing instances, and each customer needs different connectivity, so a complete different approach than you have it in a normal cloud environment. And also, to make things more complex, we have a lot of overlapping IPv4 networks, which needs to be sorted out on the customer-based cluster, because if you sort it out at a centralized location, you get issues when you do changes to it. So that was the next pain point we wanted to address, and we used the well-known EVPN type 5 VRF VXLAN overlay, which solved a lot of those issues. And each customer now owns its own VRF instance, where we then leak in the routes we need for this customer. And the next goal was that we won't want to have a lot of routing protocols, because it's then difficult to onboard new operators or network engineers. And so we decided we only want a single routing protocol which deals with all of those issues. And we then decided, yeah, BGP is the best approach, and used then BFD for the faster recovery times, because BGP timers are pretty high. And we also decided to use unnumbered BGP, because then we don't need to do any peerings from host to switches and assign their link nets, and can just use the link local addresses of both sides and then advertise our loopbacks through it. And yeah, for customer overlays, we support also both, because we had some use cases where the customer still needs a layer 2 kind of network. So we also provided then for them, for those use cases, EVPN type 2 as well. And what was also one of our design goals was to reduce or to eliminate port channels and LACP, because they are not needed when you don't have an L2 fabric. So we do the load sharing via routing and not via a layer 2 protocol or a bond protocol. And this leads to our final goal to have an L3 fabric with L3 overlays. With this exception, if a customer needs L2, we can provide it still over the same fabric.
Well, this is just a fantastic detailed description of how you addressed your goals and address the pain points. So overall, your team of say 10 or 11, do they all have pretty strong Linux skills, or are some of these coming from traditional networking?
That's half-half. So we have people which are pretty good in the Linux world, and we have also people coming from the network side. And what the people from the network engineer side provided was the use cases and also the pain points they have in day-to-day work, which we then try to address with this new design to make their life easier, and also move a lot of the configuration which was baked into network fabrics out to the host, so that it's really customer impact and not fabric impact when you change configuration.
That's interesting. So Vuk, where, after you achieve this goal in architecture, are you planning to contribute these back to the various communities and share your learnings?
Yeah, definitely. We are very convinced of community approach. We all benefit from it in many places, and I think a minimum one can do in that situation is contribute back. And we made quite some of unique things around what Marcel explained in order to make all of that running. So these things we are aiming at some point, hopefully when we have a bit more time, because we are now quite running for the deadlines to deliver some very important workloads in the production. But as soon as we get some more time, we are aiming to formulate that and to publish these things and then pieces that we in particular made and developed to make all of that running. One of our big ideas is to package all of that, not only on the networking side, but also on the other aspects of the telco cloud native infrastructure in an overall open source project, where we are looking for other partners to contribute, so that we make it even a bit shared approach and not individual initiative. So yeah, we are not yet specific on that, but the aim is there and the desire is there. So
and to give it back,
we come back to that soon.
Yeah, so let's shift gears a little to the hardware side. Can you share about what OCP hardware designs you're starting to use? I know that you'd mentioned some edge core switches. What other types of OCP hardware designs are you starting to use?
So we are currently experimenting and owning some open edge chassis from Wyvern, which are also heavily under OCP. For our current main production clusters, we use HPE hardware, which has an OCP slot, but that's all. We try currently to invest and test the new OpenEdge chassis from Wyvern, which will provide 2 nodes per 1 unit rack. And that would be awesome. And also for high density network acceleration, it would be awesome to have more network acceleration cards in 1 unit of rack. That's what we are currently exploring, but none of those are in production. So the only thing we currently have from OCP standpoint in production are Sonic from Broadcom and the edge core hardware design.
Yeah. So I think we're seeing a lot of momentum around the open edge server from WeWin. A lot of companies finding edge use cases, not only on the telco side, but on also other industry verticals. So we're very bullish on that design overall. Look, if you were to give, DT is a telco. OCP has a bit of a perception that it's hyperscale focused. If I'm an enterprise out there thinking about open networking, what are some of the things that you would recommend if I'm to go down this path on open networking?
As you mentioned, enterprise and what would be advised to enterprises, I would just like to take a step back to the open hardware. And essentially, one of the use cases to use that compact form factor and a small footprint, high density OCP hardware would be exactly in the 5G campus networks very soon. And 5G campus network is actually your own 5G network in an industrial enterprise campus, and this is what we are targeting to cover with the use case that we before mentioned. The next one is a radio access network or ORAN, and another type of very distributed infrastructures. Now, coming back to what would be advice for an enterprise, essentially that, at least in our case, when we started bringing that into organization and then showing a bit around, then the misconception was, look, yes, that's okay if you are a hyperscaler and if you have own dedicated teams who develop on top of Sonic and do the adaptations and making their own releases and so on. And then we had to, and then we managed to change that misconception around the open networking, that it is actually very much enterprise production ready. There are companies that are delivering distributions that could help on that way, and it is very performant. I would say at least looking at the market, performance price ratio is great in comparison to traditional networks, and we are as very soon releasing the full-blown 5G on top of it, among other things. So I will simply say, go out, ask the partners, and try to explore that first in smaller use cases, because it's really a game-changing approach for enterprise.
Good. And Marcel, do you have any comments on that?
Yeah, I have some comments, and I think it's not for all enterprises, especially small ones should know that there is a lot of vertical range of manufacture to have also on your side when you do that. So to have faster debugging cycles together with the company you're working with. Because without that knowledge, it's still not plug and play. We also discovered some issues in our internal networking stack And we addressed that and it got fixed, but that were some things which you need to do and need to invest time and also resources and knowledge to find them. And that's, I think, not something everyone can do. And that's
Yeah, I
my
agree with
advice
that.
for.
That's a very, very important point, that this is not for everyone, but hopefully more and more enterprises start to do what Vuk said and try it in a smaller setting or a specific use case.
I would
Speaking of,
say,
yeah,
I
go
would
ahead.
say this could bring a new paradigm, or actually a full life, into what we could call DevOps for networking. Because what Marcel said is essentially, if you are not ready to make a DevOps approach to the networking and don't have a people, then it's better to rely on the partner. But even if you have a partner, it's simply different operationally and organizationally than the traditional networking approach. So it is something that could bring a new, fresh wind into the networking approach in the enterprise.
Yeah, I like that. I like that a lot. So do you think that DT could do what you're doing without the help of communities? And this is not a loaded question. I'm not trying to promote open communities, but I really want to get your honest opinion. If being part of OCP and ONF and TIP and all these other organizations speed things along, or is it just more different points of engagement that you have to navigate?
Actually, without communities, we would not have many of the things that we have. And when I say we, I mean globally, everybody who is a part of the community. It is a great accelerator, and it's a great gravity point for the things to get them and to enable them to get mature. So I heard a lot of time arguments that some companies do not want to donate the project to a community or to a foundation because it slows things down. It might be a relevant factor or relevant argument, but at the end, the things could run fast in the beginning, but they can only grow and then mature for a benefit of everybody, and for a higher adoption and for a higher maturity within a broad and diversified community. So we think it's essential to strengthen the communities, to strengthen them by participating, as I said at the beginning, not only consuming, but also giving back, and being active, not only like contributing code and the things in the development side of a story, but also it's equally important, and we try to do that a lot, to adopt the things, and not to adopt them in the lab and then kick the tires, but also really adopt them into some serious use cases, and then feedback the issues, troubleshoot with the community and so on, and this creates a really virtuous circle. So from our perspective, the communities, especially the communities who develop things and who deliver the code, are an indispensable element of modern software industry.
What I like about DT is you guys are not only very active in these communities, but you do contribute a lot. When I look across all the various open source activities, this takes a lot of time and a lot of resource to participate in all of these, and you make valid contributions across these. You're not just out being a member for the sake of being a member. And that's one of the things I really like working with your team a lot, whether it be the ORAN Alliance or through OCP, and even what TIP is doing as well. It seems like every one of your teams is extremely active in contributing back. So as we wrap up here, what's next for DT?
So we spent intensive 2 years on developing, conceptualizing, doing MVPs, developing, pushing some things in a, let's say, smaller scale production. Now the entire onboarding of the workloads, scaling out is happening. So that's quite a lot of operational work, and for us it's all under the umbrella of what we call rollout. So we are now really very much focused to rolling things out, to scaling up. This also means getting more and more to this carrier grade level in the operations, in the processes. So this is a next step we are going to focus on. We are already thinking about next stage or next iteration in the development, which I mentioned. We call that TCAS or Telco CAS, where we aim to accelerate some of the points in the overall engine and also publish things out. So if I look at the next year, 2022, this will be a year really of scaling out and going more openly in the wild with these things, and then trying to get more adoption.
Yeah, that's good. Into the wild with DT. What about you, Marcel? What's on the schedule for next year?
So for next year, we plan to introduce and also open source our net planning tool. So we replaced NetPlan on our side with another tool. So we need to check how we can make that publicly available, and we will distribute it then. It handles all the wiring on the host for SRIOV, VXLAN bridges, link local peerings, the dummy and bonding interfaces we need, all the VRF configurations and the local peerings and all of that. And yeah, we will also share our configuration of how we get all the integrations and horizontal integration on the host, because we invented, let's call it a CNI for Kubernetes to progress with our current networking infrastructure, so that we can make use of that and also provide that as a service to our customers. And we will also try to contribute and fix a lot of stuff on the CAPI side with IPAM controllers we wrote for our central IPAM approach. And yeah, we will share our CNI stack, which we will run on the host, because that's the main point and that's the main thing we are proud of, and which helps us a lot to separate out those complex network routing issues we have.
That's great. So it sounds like it's going to be a busy year next year. So I want to encourage everyone to pay attention to what DT is doing across these open communities. Vuk, Marcel, what you guys are doing on the open networking side is exciting, and I'm sure the community will be appreciative of any of the information that you contribute back. Your team are thought leaders when it comes to this side of the infrastructure, and look forward to more contributions from DT. So Vuk, Marcel, my appreciation for your time today, and thank you very much.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks as well.
Great. I'll be back with my key takeaways from my conversation with Vuk and Marcel in just a minute. Several takeaways from my conversation today with Vuk and Marcel from DT. I really appreciated the way that they talked about the bottom-up versus the top-down approach, and how in the beginning, in the past, a lot of initiatives were from the top down, and how some of the more innovative and interesting things now are coming from the bottom-up approach, and how more organizations should be looking at that way of driving some innovation within the organization. I also like the way that they were talking about this, the telecom cluster as a service, and how software drives the security within an organization. They have a very limited team, and they were talking also in detail about how much more work traditional networking is, say, versus this new Linux-based model within DT. And lastly is their commitment to the community approach. You can look around all the open source organizations in the telco space, and even in the non-telco space, and you'll likely see DT playing a role in some form or fashion, because they really do believe in not just joining a community, but really driving these initiatives forward in the open source mindset. And it shows. Speaking with these passionate people like Vuk and Marcel, it's great to have them in the community. So my appreciation to the folks at DT, and looking forward to more episodes in the coming months of Running on OCP. Appreciate you listening, and cheers.